In the build-up to the new season of Doctor Who, I'm taking a look back at every episode from Season 1 and re-reviewing them all after a year of dwelling. Spoilers ahead for the whole series. Episode 8, Empire of Death by Russell T Davies, the finale of the first series in this new reboot-style era of the show we all know as Doctor Who. This episode promises to tie up the loose ends left by the previous episode, The Legend of Ruby Sunday, by pitting the Doctor against Sutekh, the God of Death. If you haven't seen my video on the previous part, feel free to do that, but the long and short of it is that I wasn't too impressed. I think some of the build-up was fun, but at the end of the day, the episode has very little else going for it. What this means is, in theory, I should love Empire of Death, because it will have everything. The big finale with plenty of narrative juices in it. I was incredibly excited for this episode last year when it was first on, and honestly I felt like a kid again, thinking about all the ways they could get out of the situation they were in, much like I did between the season finale parts in 2008 for Series 4. I had so many theories and plenty of discussions with people online. It was an exciting time for sure, but when it all came to fruition, all that excitement disappeared. I want to preface this all by saying I think Empire of Death is an entertaining episode. I've said this before, but I think Russell T Davies can make even a bad episode enjoyable, and that could not be more true here. Empire of Death, for all its faults, is fun. Problem is, there are a lot of those faults to contend with. Starting with the big issue that happened nice and early, leaving a sour taste in my mouth. Sutekh killed everyone. Yay. I don't like this trope. A big villain destroys life as we know it, and now we have to wait for everything to be reverted with no real stakes. Like, I get that there's still a lot of mystery behind how they're going to revert it and win, but as soon as you have every other character die, you know that it's going to end in the same way. The Doctor saves the day and everyone comes back unscathed. It happened with the Master. I'm not saying every season finale needs to kill off a main character, but when Kate Stewart and the rest of UNIT died, I got genuinely excited at the idea of such a bold move. I want there to be real stakes. Everyone dying, funnily enough, is less scary than only a few people dying. Had UNIT died and no one else, we could believe that they were going to be gone forever because of Sutekh, which makes him a huge threat to us, the viewer. But like I said, wiping everyone out in the first 5 minutes just means we all now know everyone will survive in the end. It was fine when Avengers Infinity War did it, because it hadn't been done to death by that point, but now it's just a run-of-the-mill plot device that leads to a predictable ending. On this topic though, I do like the dusting effects when people die by Sutekh. This is quite a good looking episode. You know, I don't love that Sutekh was a big CGI dog, but I get it, they needed him to have evolved and be a physically bigger threat than the Sutekh of the past. But in turn, that just made him seem like less of a threat. If you show me a being the size and shape of a human and tell me what destruction they're capable of, I find that far more imposing and threatening than a CGI dog. It's human nature to find imbalances like this unnerving. You expect a huge creature to be powerful. You don't expect someone the size of your neighbour to be able to wipe out humanity, which is exactly why they're so much more scary. It's strange, for a show that's always seemed to understand this with villains such as the Master or Davros, they really threw it out the window with Sutekh. The dog CGI is fine, it's not great, but it works well enough. I mean, I don't love the design either. If he's got to be a big CGI dog, I don't know, just make him a bit scarier. I'm just nitpicking here. A lot of the other design work is cool. I like the zombie harbinger style creatures, but I am just distracting myself from the main talking points here. So Sutekh killed everyone. To sum up, I think this instantly sets up a very predictable end to the episode and cheapened all the stakes. Next up, what's the deal with Sutekh? So he got cast out into the time vortex or whatever by Tom Baker, and then he clung to the TARDIS until now. Do I really need to list off all the reasons that doesn't work? Remember when Davros tried to incinerate the TARDIS? Or Jack clung to the TARDIS and they went to the end of the universe? Or the TARDIS blew up and ended the universe? I can go on. It's just not believable to me that the TARDIS had this giant god stuck to it since the 70s, and he just didn't wake up at all or move around when all this happened. I appreciate you have to accept timey-wimey stuff in Doctor Who, but there is a limit. I have a cold, by the way, that's why I sound like this. Russell T Davies and Moffat, to an extent, were always very good at filling in gaps in lore, whereas one of the biggest issues that people have with The Timeless Child is that it wasn't filling in gaps with the Doctor's history, it was changing the Doctor's history. This is a very similar thing. We aren't now finding out that Sutekh was sitting above the clouds the whole time, something that doesn't affect past stories. No, we're now finding out that the entire time there was a huge change to the main vehicle the Doctor uses, and we're supposed to just accept that. I don't know, I always struggle with lore changes like this. Hell, they even had the TARDIS start groaning in Wild Blue Yonder and have the Doctor do that salt thing that he did. Why not just say that Sutekh came back in that episode? It would make way more sense. It's like turning around and saying the Timeless Child is actually the Master. You know, it is objectively the correct storyline to go down, and it's the easiest way to turn the story into something that makes more sense. Anyway, yeah, so Sutekh survived in the time vortex, and now we're supposed to believe that the Doctor killed him this time by leaving him in the time vortex. If he comes back, no one will be surprised, and if he doesn't, well, that's just lazy writing. I do like a lot of this episode, for the record. I think it's a very fun watch, but I don't like any of the things that happen in a narrative sense. The whole memory TARDIS thing is cool. I like the idea of the memory of a time machine looking like that, and it was a really cool way of tying that into the Tales of the TARDIS specials from 2023. I now realise why it was so easy and cheap to film them if they had that set just sitting around. Mel was cool in this episode too. It's nice to see older companions coming back a bit more. It's interesting that the only episode of Mel's tenure in the TARDIS that was mentioned was Time and the Rani. It's funny that. Anyway, this whole episode hinges on the Doctor and Ruby finding out her mum's identity. Why can't Sutekh see her? Why couldn't we see her face in the time window? Why is she so important? Now, I want to say one thing before I continue. I like the idea of her not needing to be anyone special. The idea that she's an ordinary woman is a nice sentiment. I even appreciate the notion of some things seeming more powerful because of the importance we put on them. However, and this is where the entire season falls apart, I'll try and word this in just a couple of sentences. If you trick the audience into piecing together the wrong clues, and then hit them with a curveball of the truth, it works. If you outright tell the audience something, and then go back on it, that does not work. Do you see where I'm coming from? At the end of the day, the series was not some low-level hype-building exercise like the bees disappearing. You know, if that had never come to anything in Series 4, that would have been fine. They weren't important, it was just a good red herring. But when the show itself clearly tells the audience that Ruby's mum is special, that night was special, Ruby is special, then you have to deliver on that. I'm not saying this as someone who is disappointed by the reveal. I actually like the fact that she's an ordinary woman. I'm saying this as a fan of cohesive narratives. The series arc did not work. The show was not implying that she was special, it told us that she was special. Suddenly that reveal goes from a slight curveball twist to an outright lie, and that's where my biggest issue with that lies. Her being so important to Ruby that the memories kept changing, that Sutekh, the god of death, was confused and ended up being defeated because he was so intrigued by this. I'm sorry, it's not just a case of a reveal that I didn't like, it's a case of a rushed ending that doesn't fit the rest of the story. Oh, also, turning and pointing at a sign that wasn't there until the moment it appears is the worst written moment in all of Doctor Who. I'm not exaggerating here, there is no amount of importance in the memory you can argue to make that a sensible payoff for all of this. It sucks because the setup for all this was so exciting, but it felt like just such a poorly thought out ending. I know I'm probably sounding so harsh and I hate to do it. Russell T Davies is one of my favourite writers and he shaped a crazy amount of my childhood. But my brother in Christ, you dropped the ball on this one, I'm afraid. Unit finally finding Ruby's mum is nice though, and them meeting was a really sweet and well done moment. Ruby then leaving the TARDIS to stay with her family was a nice scene too. Obviously completely unnecessary, but hey, she's 19 and she found her birth mum. You can excuse her for not realising the time machine can get her back to that very moment. And we're seeing her soon in Season 2 anyway. I do assume that she was meant to be in both seasons, and that, you know, that was a tacked on ending because it really doesn't make a lot of sense for her to stay behind, but don't worry about it. The production issues behind this series they're endless. The other things in this episode that are worth talking about, well, I think they jumped the gun doing anything with Mrs. Flood yet. I do like her scenes. Talking to the camera and all that at the end was a fun addition. I think they would have benefited from not having her act unusual at all throughout the whole series until that moment, but that's just more or less a nitpick and not a real complaint. You know, that's how I would have done it. I think they could have made her a lot more scary with that reveal of her on the rooftop, maybe not even saying anything, just looking at the camera, and kind of that's what gets you to come back for the next series, whereas now we've already known that she's a bit weird, probably evil. A lot of people were just frustrated we didn't find out. I think it would have been a cool teaser for the next series if that's the first moment we found out she was potentially more than just a neighbour. Bringing death to death is a really fun way to reverse death, and while I was a bit frustrated with the whole reversing everything trope in general, this was a really well done instance of it. Likewise, the Doctor dealing with the fact that he brought death to wherever he landed was a really cool concept to deal with. Obviously the Doctor isn't stupid, and it was wildly out of character of him to actually have been bothered by that or blame himself for that, but it's a fun thing to explore anyway. The constant mentions of Susan were a little odd for that not to come to fruition. But let's be real, Season 1 and Season 2 are just one big season that got split in half because production on this show is absolutely insane, and it's going to come to fruition at the end of the next season anyway. There were some golden moments in this one, like that mystery planet with the woman and the dead baby. It was a really hard-hitting scene, and I really enjoyed that we got to see the fallout from Sutekh's work on the general public rather than just the Doctor and team. That's something Russell T Davies always did well in my opinion, showing the normal people when stuff goes wrong. There's still a lot to like about this episode, and it is a lot of fun to watch, but at its core, it's an overly convoluted story with no real payoff. And it ends the season arc in a really disjointed and narratively incohesive way. I truly do think that if the 60th anniversary hadn't been the main focus for so much of the production of this series, then we might have had a very different result. But hey, when Doctor Who Hiatus Volume 2 gets announced in a couple of months, I'll drop my video aptly named How the 60th Anniversary Killed Doctor Who. Anyway, Empire of Death gets a 3 out of 10. Easily the worst episode in the series, regrettably. I have high hopes for the next series, and the fact they did reshoots suggests one of two things to me. One, Ncuti Gat was leaving and they filmed his regeneration, which is, you know, probably is the case. Number 2, they heard the responses from this series and rewrote some of the reveals and hopefully made the whole thing make more sense, and I'm hoping it's that one, but realistically there's no way Shooting Gatwa can film a third series, so yeah, be ready for a shock regeneration tacked onto the end of a series with an otherwise happy ending. It's gonna feel disjointed. Thanks for watching. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know. And are you excited for the new season? Because I'll be honest, I am, despite all of this. If you watched every video I made on season 1, thank you, you're awesome. Be sure to stick around for my videos about season 2 and many more about Doctor Who in general. I'll have a video about the Robot Revolution coming out on Sunday, probably, unless I get really hard at work on Saturday. But until then, stay wibbly, stay wobbly, stay timey-wimey, and I'll see you in the next one.